This next section is advanced dial plan, and this is actually the last session, module for this session. So the goals, we're going to define what a variable is in the Asterisk dial plan. We're going to look at functions and how to use those in the dial plan. And expressions, again, we're going to go over each of these. And then conditional branching, branch to another place in the dial plan based on something being true or false. So what is a variable? Any programmers out there? I assume quite a few. It's the same thing in any programming language. It's a named container that can hold a value. And I guess in this case, the value is a star. To do this, what we're doing right here is we're saying that the variable trunk actually holds this value, pjsip/server trunk. And then if we're going to try to dial out the server trunk, we could do it this way using the dial command server trunk, or we could substitute the variable name in there. That would be expanded to pjsip/server trunk. To dereference that variable, we use the $ curly brace, like down here in trunk. So what that does is it dereferences the value pjsip server trunk. So that and this would be identical in this case. So how do we set that variable? Well, we use the set application. Here's a sample of setting number equal to 0. And then the next priority, we do a say number and then hang up. So what do you think that'll do? Well, it's going to say the number 0. I don't think I have that in my dial plan. Let me check.
0.
I do. Sure. Can you come up to the mic?
Really?
Yes. Oh, sorry.
That's okay. When I send a variable into the dial plan from, let's say, an originate, and I'm passing variables into the dial plan, and I want to get one of those variables back in an event, say from the hang-up, is there any way I can get that variable into that event and pass back to me in my listener? Through AMI?
Through AMI. You have to request it from the AMI.
I know I can send a user event.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about if I want one of the other events that's getting triggered, like the hang-up or a bridge, like an agent request, and I'm bridging something, or how do I get that variable? Or anyway?
You can do a get variable using the AMI, but you have to know that you want to get it. So you could respond to the hang-up event.
I'm responding to the hang-up event, but it doesn't there's nowhere I can get that back.
You have to do the get variable command, AMI command.
I've tried that.
It should be there. Another option would be to use an AGI on the hang-up and
Okay.
send it across that way. You should be able to get it with the get variable AMI command. I'm not sure why you're not getting it.
Okay. One more question.
Sure.
You know the event that listens to what variables are changing through AMI with the events? I forget what it's called. Oh, I guess.
You got to stand up.
It's just, they don't want to look. You know the event that listens for when variables change in AMI?
I'm not aware of that one.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, then,
I'm not doubting there is one, but I just never used that one. I never looked for that. Maybe I can answer the question anyway, or
I can't get the word right.
hit me offline. We'll talk about it.
Okay.
Okay, so if I dial 1,000 here, like I did a second ago,
0.
it says back plays back 0. So what we did here, you can see it's setting number equal to 0. Then we did say number, and we dereferenced number in the dial plan. Get back to it. There we go. We dereferenced number, which ended up being 0, so it played back the number 0. In this one, you can also set a channel variable using the read application. It's listening for a key press. So in this case, it would answer the call. It'll play back the sound file enter extension of person. It'll store that value, whatever they type, in the variable named number. And it'll play back you entered and then number there. So that's another way of setting a channel variable. And these variables live on the channel itself. And once the channel is completely hung up, they're gone. So there are a few predefined variables. You always have the variable named context. Which context is this call currently in? What's the extension within that context that this call is currently at? And then what priority is this call currently at? These are always set, no matter what. Then there's the next one really isn't a predefined channel variable. It's more of a application set variable. So the dial application will set a variable named dial status. And that might be answered, it might be busy, it might be congestion, it might be a few other things. I think one of them is torture. I'm not sure what that means, but there's an example of using extend. Note that all of these are uppercase. The predefined variables and application set variables are always uppercase, and variables are case sensitive. There's a sample of that. So normally what I usually do is I do all mine lowercase. My user defined variables lowercase. That way I don't get them mixed up with the predefined variables. And note that trunk and trunk are not equal. They were in Asterisk 11. So that's some changed behavior. If you're upgrading from an older Asterisk server, things might not work correctly. So we kind of saw this earlier. There's, for debugging dial plan, you can use the no-op application, and that does nothing to the phone call itself. All it does is spits out in the command line interface whatever's the argument to that application. In this case, it would print out message in the CLI. And in this case, it would print out the value of number is, and since we define number equal to 4567, it would say the value of number is 4567 because it's dereferencing that channel variable we set. And there's an example of the CLI and it actually printing it out.
Can you do a function within the message?
Sure. We'll get to functions shortly. I might have a sample of that. I'm not sure. I'm trying to think if I do. Similar to the no-op, we have a application called verbose. And what that does will do the same thing. It'll print out things to the CLI or the log files. But in this case, with verbose, there's a verbosity level that it's set. So we can say verbose 3, the value of number is whatever the number is, and that'll print out the same thing that the no-op did, assuming our CLI is at a certain verbosity level. So if the verbosity level is below 3, it's not going to print it out. If it's above 3 or above, it will print out that message. So that's a good way to get rid of all the noise in the command line interface, and you can turn up the verbosity if you're trying to debug something. So what are functions? Functions are kind of similar to variables. In fact, they kind of look like variables that take a parameter. You can get and set functions just like you can a variable. And there's the syntax. It's not really a function like most programmers think of functions. That's not what these are. These are setting values for applications to use. In this case, timeout would be a function, and there are multiple different arguments for timeout. So we have a digit timeout. So while you're in the read application, you can set the digit timeout, and it'll quit listening for digits after a certain amount of time. There's also an absolute timeout. What that does is hangs up the call after a certain amount of seconds. So in this case, after 3,600 seconds, the call will be hung up no matter what. And the dial application actually looks at the absolute timeout. Then there's an example of using the length function on a variable named extend, the predefined variable. So what that'll do is, in this case, say the digits of however long the extension is. So the extension we're at was, say, 7001. It would say digits 4 in that case. Questions? Functions can be kind of confusing because they named them functions to start with, but they really aren't functions. They are setting values for applications. Caller ID is a function as well. So you can set the caller ID number and name, and the dial application looks at that, what was set, when it sends a call out. In this case, we're sending the call out some PJ-SIP trunk to some example.com company that's our telephone service provider, and it will send out the 256-428-6000 as the number and Digium Inc. as the name, assuming that carrier allows you to set caller ID. A lot of them do not allow it anymore, or it only allows it to be set to a certain range of numbers you own, which is a good thing. A lot of caller ID spoofing going on nowadays that is annoying. So there's another example of getting the length of a string. So in this sample, we set the variable, some random variable, equal to 5. The next line, we say the number of some random variable, so it's going to say 5. Then the next priority, it's going to say the length of the some random variable, which would end up being 1. So it's going to, this whole piece of dial plan right here will say 5 and then 1 and then hang up. I don't know if I have that. Let's see.
5, 1.
I do. Let's watch that. Or we can just look at it right there. Well, let's do it again.
5, 1.
So it said the number 5 because some random variable is equal to 5. Then it said 1 because we've got the length of that variable. So expressions. Expressions are statements within the dial plan that actually return a value. Strings, integers, booleans, various different types of values can be returned. They are composed of strings, variables, and operators. You use it to do math. You use it to test whether or not something's equal and branch based on whether or not it's equal. You can do a lot of logical comparisons using these expressions. Let's look at an expression here real quick. Well, look at the syntax first. An expression looks a lot like a variable again, except it's square brackets, not the curly braces. You can do mathematical operators. In this case, those are square brackets. It's kind of hard to tell. But $square bracket 1 plus 2, so that would actually just evaluate to a 3. In this case, we would be seeing if var1, the value of var1, because it's a variable, checking to see if it's less than the value of var2, and then return true or false based on that. And then there's some Boolean operators that you can use as well, where you can do an AND. So in that case, value of variable is greater than 0 and less than 9. So in this case, we have var2 equal to the expression of 2 plus 3. And then we're going to say the variable var2 contains whatever in var2, and there's a sample of that actually running. And just as you would expect, it prints out 5. So one of the best uses for these expressions is to do a incrementer, to loop through things only a certain amount of time. In this case, we're setting the count equal to 3. The next line, we're setting count equal to count plus 1. And then we're echoing out what the count is. And just as you would expect, down at the bottom, the count is 4. So that's just a sample of incrementing the value of a variable using an expression. The goToIf. goToIf is a lot like the goTo application, but it takes an expression and will branch based on true or false of the expression. You can use the same sort of things that you could in goTo. Like in goTo, you could use priority, extension priority, or the context extension of priority. The same is true for the goToIf. So in this sample, we are setting the test variable equal to 1. We're checking to see if the test variable is greater than 2. And if it's true, which is the first item after the question mark, it's going to go to a label named weasels. If it's false, it's going to go to a label named monkeys. And so in this case, 1 is not greater than 2, so it's false. So it's going to go down to monkeys, and it's going to play back a sound file called ttmonkeys, and then hang up. I hope I had this in here. Let's see.
Weasels have eaten our phone system.
Okay. That was weasels. I apparently have something different in my dial plan. Let's go see. Yeah, I had the test variable set to 3 and not 1. So it played weasels instead of monkeys. I know, y'all want me to set it to 1, don't you? All right. I don't know where it is. What was that number? 6-1. There we go. All right, so I changed that, but is that going to work right now? No, we need to reload the dial plan. Okay. And that's a bunch of screaming monkeys. And it lasts a long time. Okay. So that's a sample of the goToIf. Note here, you don't have to have two destinations. If you leave off one of them and it's supposed to, like in this case, we're leaving off the true one, and it evaluates to true, it's just going to fall through to the next line. Only will it branch somewhere else if it's false. And the vice versa is true. If we had a true one and not a false, and it ended up being false, it would fall through to the next line. If you do not have a label, a priority, or something in the true or false space. So here's a way to use a loop to increment and branch based on the value of your incremented value. So to start with, the test variable is equal to 1. If the test variable is greater than 2, then go to weasels, otherwise go to monkeys. Well, it's not, so it's going to go down to monkeys. It's going to play back TT monkeys, and it's going to set test variable equal to test variable plus 1. So at that point, and then it's going to go back to begin, which is the goToIf. So now test variable equals 2. So is 2 greater than 2? No. So it's going to play monkeys again. And increment it one more time, and now it's 3. So at this point, it is greater than 2, so it's going to go to weasels, play back weasels, and then hang up the phone call. And I don't think I want to do this, but let's see. No, I don't have it. Good. Good for all of us. So with this goToIfs and incrementing variables, we can improve the IVR we had a little bit ago, where we give it a failed attempts. Then we have the menu beginning. If failed attempts is greater than 2, we're just going to go to hang up, which is right down below our wait extend, which is what you were asking about earlier. Why was that hang up, and would it ever get there? Well, now it will, because we gave it a label, and we're going to explicitly go to that extension if failed attempts is greater than 2. So down in our invalid key press or the timeout extension, we're going to increment that failed attempts. So in this case, it's going to, if we don't press any key, it's going to go down to timeout, increment the failed attempts, and go back up to menu beginning. Check it again. If they don't press anything again, it's going to go down and increment it, and it'll do it. So if it ever equals 3 or greater, then it's going to go to the hang up. So it's not going to just sit there and loop forever like our old IVR would. You don't want that to happen. You want to be able to break out of it. Make sense? Any questions on this? There will be a test. Any questions? That is the advanced dial plan, and we went through the variables, functions, expressions, and conditional branching, and that is the end of the Asterisk from Scratch session. I hope y'all enjoyed it and learned something. If y'all have any questions, feel free to send me an email or whatever, and I'll answer what I can.